right, are we ready, Allie?
Yes, you are all set.
Are we broadcasting?
We are live now.
Wonderful. Good morning. Good morning. I want to welcome everyone to our Workforce Development and Education Subcommittee for the Kansas Cybersecurity Task Force. This is our second subcommittee meeting. So thank you for those who are joining us this morning. We have, I know, a couple of our task force members. I'm going to have the task force members go around and introduce themselves, and then I will introduce our guests. So Jeff, can you kick us off?
Good morning, everyone. Jeff Maxon. I am the Chief Information Security Officer for the state of Kansas.
Okay. And then do I see Doug? Are you here?
Yes, Doug Peters, Finney County IT Department.
Wonderful. Thanks, Doug. And one of our other task force members, subcommittee members, Senator Pittman, is unable to join us, but he will be back at future meetings. I do know we have a few guests that are joining us today. John, are you here from NGA? Am I seeing John, or do I see Steve?
Good morning, John Guerrero here from NGA, and Steve's on the line as well too.
Hi, everyone. Steve Fugelsang.
Wonderful. Welcome, welcome. And then we also have another colleague that may be familiar from former conversations, Dr. Eugene Wasserman from KSU. Dr. Wasserman, I see you're on, right?
I am here. Hello.
Wonderful. The NGA team is going to talk about workforce development this morning. And Dr. Wasserman, we invited to join us. He presented at our September 1 task force meeting and just thought he would be a great additional resource to our discussion as we continue to think about how do we shape some of the recommendations around workforce development and education. So welcome to all. What I want to say is just as we kick this morning off, a best way to kind of maximize our time is that we'll hear from John and the NGA team, who will talk about, what they're seeing, the work that they're seeing in states around workforce development, some recommendations and work that they have seen come out, particularly around cyber workforce development. So he'll be sharing some of that, helping us to continue to think about recommendations that we want to formulate here. And then after the discussion with the NGA team, we'll dig a little bit more into our recommendations, recognizing that we're supposed to have kind of some high level ideas and a few recommendations to the larger group by September 27th. Again, this is only a first stage. It gives us a foundation for the longer report, which isn't due until December. But if there are things that we can begin to pull out that we know, we'll want to start to frame them in this earlier report out. Just as a reminder from our last subcommittee meeting, there were some themes I think that started to kind of emerge that we'll pull on today. You all should have received the meeting notes, and I think they're also still on, or we post them on the SharePoint drive. I think one of the themes that emerged last time is around higher education, partnering with our Kansas institutions, both that have cybersecurity programs, thinking about internships, hands-on learning, experiencing, establishing, scholarships or those pipeline opportunities, but also thinking about how we, leverage into the research components of the programs that have that as well. I think one of the other themes that came through was around training and using existing models and partners like, Kansas Law Enforcement Center or like KU's Public Management Center to provide training at different levels. When we think about that workforce development and trying to identify and solidify a workforce that can step into the needs and the gaps that we have around the state. Another theme that I think emerged was around, the city, counties, and thinking about those resources and initiatives. How do we stand up, tools and mechanisms that they can leverage into? One of the discussions we had was around, master contracts and making sure if we can get certain services on contract at the state, that they're open to political subdivisions, allowing, cities and counties to be able to tap into that, and providing those contracts to them, with a little bit of coordination and facilitation. That's just one suggestion that I know that we talked about, but really, that theme being, what are the resources and initiatives that we can help leverage into the cities and counties, recognizing that there are different structures, some who have full IT teams, some who do not. And so also being mindful as we start to identify these resources and initiatives that they are positioned in such a way that the cities and counties can take advantage of them, depending on their structure and their size. And then, of course, I think the last was really thinking about, workforce development is in our quote unquote title of our subcommittee, but thinking about what that looks like in terms of job titles and descriptions, how we leverage the knowledge across industries to really strengthen what we know where the needs are in cybersecurity, from state government to the private sector to education. Are there places and spaces where we can really compartmentalize the work to understand what is needed, and how we then leverage that and communicate that to identify talent, the pipeline, those types of things. Those are just some of the high level ones that kind of pulled through. There'll be more as we continue the conversation today, and as we think about just what's going on in our spaces and what we're seeing. So with that, I'm actually going to kick it over to John and the NGA team to share with us a little bit about what they're seeing in other states, what type of actions and recommendations are coming out of those spaces, and what we might want to think about as we continue our piece of this conversation. So John, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Secretary. And I just wanted to check, Allie, were you able to receive my slides? Did it come through? I know it might have been a little slow through the email there, but if not, I can always share mine too.
I did get them. So let me share that and let me know if you can see it.
Oh, perfect. There we go. All right. So good morning, everyone. My name is John Guerrero, Senior Policy Analyst with NGA Cybersecurity Program. Thanks for having me on today. I know I spoke with most of you maybe a month ago on the kickoff call, and I was on last week's subcommittee calls too, and I'm looking to kind of join as many of these different subcommittee calls as I can over the next few weeks. So it's been great working with Kansas the past few months, really looking forward to continuing that work into the future. And just for some context, for 2 years prior to when I joined NGA Cybersecurity Program, I actually was part of NGA's workforce development team too. So the cyber workforce education training is always near and dear to my heart. So my remarks today are going to break down into about four different categories. Just really high level, just a reintroduction of what we do here at NGA. Looking through the participant list, looks like most people were familiar with what I spoke about last month, so I'll probably breeze through that. But then I did want to kind of give a brief overview of some of the different NGA workforce development work that has been going on at the organization the past few years, including a particular policy academy on scaling work-based learning that I was a part of, and that actually Kansas was a part of as well. And then I'll do an overview of the cyber workforce development landscape, somewhat what are the challenges out there, what are some potential solutions that states are taking to address it, and then I'll give out some just kind of brief report outs from some state highlights from different from previous cyber policy academies, as well as what some of Kansas's peer states are doing in this year's cohort. So on the next slide, just kind of that really high level breakdown of the NGA. We have We have our association side that represents our membership governors and advocates for their interests on Capitol Hill. And then we have our Center for Best Practices, to which Steve and I belong, which is a separate 501c3 that serves as that state-facing policy consulting shop for governors, their advisors. And within that NGA Center, there's a number of different programs. So we have the cybersecurity program. You can kind of see it on the next slide here too, but there's cyber, there's K-12, there's workforce development policy, there's homeland security. There's a number of these different policy areas, programmatic areas within the center. And you can kind of see how cyber really works well, I believe, with all three of those, or all of those number of different program areas. And then, so kind of on the next slide, focusing in our cyber work a little bit more, our cyber portfolio really revolves around our Resource Center for State Cybersecurity, co-chaired by Arkansas Governor Asa Hutchinson and Louisiana Governor John Bell Edwards. Essentially just a network to establish governors with the different resources, tools, and recommendations to help craft and implement effective state cybersecurity policies and practices. And we work with states really through a number of different ways. We have our big national summit that we look to hold every year. We have monthly newsletters, webinars, ad hoc technical assistance, and then policy academies like what we're working with Kansas on this year and what we've been working over the past few years with different states. So I guess if you go to the next two slides, maybe. But I can breeze through this pretty quickly, Ali. Our cyber, really, we focus in on 5 different priority areas. Those are workforce development, incident response, critical infrastructure security, state cyber governance, state local partnerships. And how we work with our policy academy every year is we have states different to apply under these different strategic action areas. Kansas applied under the governance issue area, but oftentimes many of these blend together, and the state's actual work in the policy academy incorporates different aspects of the cyber portfolio that we have. So that's, in a very brief nutshell, NGA's cybersecurity work. And I wanted to switch gears here to a different policy academy. I believe it's slide 8. Ali.
Does this look right?
We're not seeing the presentation screen now. We're seeing the actual PowerPoint arrangement screen.
Yeah, we're not seeing it in read mode or anything like that. But
I think the screen share itself may be frozen. Sorry for interrupting.
Sorry, Ali. Again, probably this might be
I apologize.
a result of me sending this last minute.
No, you're good. Wait, I apologize. Yeah, I unmuted myself and it changed the screen. What do you see right now?
We see just it's the the slide layout screen with I think it's on slide like 3 or 4.
All right, we're gonna start fresh. But maybe not. I swear I'm a millennial. I should know better when it comes to technology.
Do you want me to share it?
Possibly. I'm gonna give it one more shot and we'll see what happens. All right, I think you still see the slide layout for the most part.
I believe you have to enter presentation mode before you share your screen for this to work.
I apologize. John, do you want to give it a shot?
Sure.
Let me stop sharing my screen so you can get in there.
right, is that coming up for folks?
I can see it.
Okay, perfect. So back in 2015, our workforce development team here at NGA, we launched a policy academy on scaling work-based learning programs with states. And it's gone through a number of different phases. We did phase 1 in 2015, through 2017, and then phase 2, we expanded the cohort by about 12 states in 2017 through 2019, and now it's in phase 3, which is it's expanded even more, and it's kind of more of a kind of almost like a network now of states. But back when we were doing this in 2017 through 2019, the objective of the work here was for states to expand high quality work-based learning opportunities for youth and young adults to enter skilled jobs in which they could use STEM skills. The specific goals of this project were to create cross-system support for work-based learning that really embeds itself into state education and workforce systems, to boost the number of high quality work-based learning programs and participants within the state, and then ensure that those positive outcomes are delivered to both employers and to different individuals. And then finally, to ensure that students and learners on all the different pathways have access to quality work-based learning programs, and that it's not a lesser option for those who aren't going to four-year schools or community colleges. So in all, by 2019, we were working with 17 states in different cohorts. We had 5 that have been working with us for 4 years that were serving as leader states. We had 6 or 7 that were in the active policy academy, and then we had 6 states that were kind of lesser touch. They didn't receive direct funding for that, and Kansas was a part of that kind of lesser touch states that we worked with a bit. And so this policy academy really focused in on 3 pillars for state systems change. And we worked with each of the states to kind of craft different goals around these 3 pillars. So we had the vision and communication, really creating that statewide vision for work-based learning programs, the data and measurement piece, how to actually measure it, and then how to collect it, how to identify what is actually already being collected in states, and then the resources and policy. How do we make that work long term? How do we sustain it across initial seed money? How do we sustain it across administration change, things like that? And some of the lessons that we learned from this, on the vision and measurable, or the vision and communication side, really having kind of that cross-system alignment between the education system, the workforce system, and then also engaging both state leadership in the governor's office as well as state legislature, and bringing in some of the different non-state assets across the states, like the different industry, academia, nonprofit, having them all work together, because none of this is really a standalone effort. They all really align and kind of depend a lot upon each other. And then on the data and measurement side, this was actually a really major challenge for a lot of states. I think we found that in a lot of states, many times this data wasn't collected. There was no common definition on what a work-based learning program was, or that information might not be shared well between the different systems in the state. So maybe it's collected in the education system, but not shared with the workforce development system, or vice versa. And sometimes there's just real big kind of gaps there. And then on the resources and policy side, one of the main lessons there was just really how to identify that the different resources beyond the pilots or the incentive funds to sustain those efforts. What are some of the long-term solutions? Some states looked at the legislation option to implement policy changes to support that expansion of those work-based learning programs. Some really just looked to build capacity across the systems at the local levels, especially to implement and sustain some of those strategies. And some of that might have looked more like a private partnership, private public-private partnership, or some different sort of kind of alignment with the private sector on some of those state strategies. So that's a really, really extremely condensed version of a multi-year project, but I do want to encourage you to check out NGA's project page on this. I've linked it here. It's like I said before, it's evolved into a third stage that's ongoing, and I'd be more than happy to connect this team here with our workforce team that's running it now. But on that page, at that link, you'll see different reports, strategy papers, etc. It's all pretty good and worth checking out. Before we slide into the cyber workforce development piece, any questions on this Policy Academy? Okay.
This is Jeff. So real quickly, apologize, sorry, I'm trying to unmute myself. This was a completely separate Policy Academy than what the cyber policy academies are, correct?
Yes, that was a completely separate, completely different program area, different everything. So one of those things is that's so, and across like NGA's 16 different policy program areas, each one of those program areas does conduct policy academies. So they'll have different ones on different topics, things like that. So at any different moment across NGA, there may be 15 policy academies going on.
Thank you. That makes sense.
So John, I guess my question is, in introducing that work-based learning work, and maybe it'll be further in your presentation, is there something that we can learn from that or consider that you all have seen outcomes that have been helpful in helping to develop talent in particularly the cyber or the IT space?
I think the real big takeaway from that is on the data and the measurement side. I think from what I was hearing in the early on in the presentation, just that discussion over kind of doing that inventory of what are some of the existing efforts across the state, what are some of the existing resources that the state has at its disposal to assist just larger statewide cybersecurity workforce development, and then also local government, particularly. I know a few states, and I'll kind of get to this later on in the deck, but there's a few states that really just doing that initial almost inventory of what are the different programs, what are the different training organizations, what does that landscape look like within the state is really that first step. And I think one of the lessons from that Workforce Development Policy Academy was that that's actually one of the hardest ones to actually get, hands across.
Okay, thank you.
So with that in mind, I want to turn back to the cybersecurity aspect. One of our favorite sayings, I think, within our program is cybersecurity is not just, it's not an IT issue anymore. And our Policy Academy on whole state cybersecurity really does reflect that. But at the state level, we are seeing just that increased recognition that state cybersecurity is no longer the sole responsibility of the state's IT department or each agency's IT staff, and that the most robust state responses and really frameworks look to meet that ever-present cyber threat by integrating all the different resources the state has to bear against the problem. So that's the IT department, maybe that's Homeland Security, public safety, emergency management, National Guard, law enforcement. And I think increasingly the workforce development, education, training systems, economic development, along with all the different partners in nonprofit, academia, and then industry. So when we talk about that ever evolving threat facing states, key aspect of that is the critical workforce shortage in the cyber industry. And we hear about it time and time again, but I wanted to kind of dig into a bit why that matters here. So every industry has that cybersecurity risk, and every industry needs cybersecurity professionals across all the different sectors, all the different critical infrastructure sectors. I probably don't need to tell this audience that. But that's only increasing now with the rise in ransomware. So if you think through all the different sectors, all the different organizations that really need the cybersecurity professionals to implement those, proper hygiene, to safeguard its systems, its networks. It's a massive number of skilled candidates that are required. And there is, as everyone has kind of been hearing about, there is that gap between the candidates that are being produced by the existing pipeline and then the demand there. So here on the slide, I do have a lot of different, really, I think, pretty good resources. So on the bottom right, we have the Growing a Stronger Federal Cyber Workforce that the Cyber Solarium Commission released last year. And then at the state and local level, I know this team has heard from NASCIO, but every year NASCIO and Deloitte do a really great survey each year where they work with state CIOs and CISOs and just kind of really ask them about some of the different concerns facing them. And every year I feel like for that list of top state concerns, cyber workforce development shortage is one of the top responses. Just that the lack of enough skilled workers to adequately protect and monitor state networks and then respond and recover when there is an incident. That's always been a major concern across states. And then looking to address some of those challenges and shortages is the National Initiative for Cybersecurity Education, NICE, which is part of the NIST at the Commerce Department. Really, they're the national experts on cyber education training. And they developed a workforce framework for cybersecurity. I think a new revision was actually released last year on that. And that framework just maps out the different tasks, knowledge, skills needed for cyber work, which helps organizations develop their workforce and helps candidates explore and engage in the right activities to help build some of their knowledge and skills. And I know that's been a big thing for states as they look to really map a lot of their existing positions, some of the language and descriptions in those positions to that framework, and just trying to get that kind of more uniform framework essentially, so that things are a little bit more translatable, things are transferable, and things can be easily almost crosswalked between what education programs are putting out, and then how do those apply to the different positions available. And then in 2016, NICE also, they did a pilot program for, it's their RAMPS program. It's regional alliances and multi-stakeholder partnerships. And there's like 5 other words in there. It's a mouthful, but it's their RAMPS program. And part of that was really just, they released a roadmap that's kind of linked here on the bottom left. But the 4 primary components there for really different organizations within states to really strengthen their partnerships across different sectors and with different partners is to establish the program goals and metrics, develop strategies and tactics, measuring impact and results, and then how to sustain that effort. And then flowing through each of those levels is that need for engagement with industry partners. So kind of thinking through what are some of the key challenges for state cyber workforces. And this, obviously is not exhaustive, but kind of thinking through them in these 3 buckets of building talent, recruiting talent, retaining talent. Those are kind of where the 3, I think, big challenges are, not just with states, but I think just all over the board as well. But at the build the talent level, really too few schools and states really offer cybersecurity curriculum throughout K-12. And those that do are often those with the most resources. So maybe those less affluent schools, or maybe those with issues or access issues or bandwidth issues or connectivity issues are often left behind. Another aspect of this would be just the lack of qualified trained teachers to teach. Those who do have the training to teach cybersecurity probably will leave the school in search of a more higher paying job. And then recruiting, there's a lot of different issues at the recruiting level, but I think at the most basic level, really organizations are struggling to find the right number of candidates with the skills to meet their needs. Part of that is the difficulty in actually assessing and defining what their needs are. For various reasons, they don't really have a clear picture of what their own needs are, what their roles, responsibilities, skills, years experience required. There's often a really kind of a lack of consistency around what each of these mean across different organizations, sectors, and this is one of those things that the NICE framework does seek to address. But anyway, that lack of clarity really ties also into just the murkiness of I think states to really kind of grasp what their regional or statewide labor market looks like for cybersecurity. I think states have struggled to identify what are the different training programs and organizations in their region that are producing cyber talent. Maybe that's sometimes they look to kind of conduct that inventory scan. Maybe it's ad hoc, maybe it's just writing it down. And there's not a real formal process for that, which can lead to issues about where to really allocate resources, where to recruit, just all that sorts of things. And then on the retention side, once a state or local agency does hire a qualified candidate, and again, I'm probably preaching to the choir here, but retaining them is very difficult just because, many state and local agencies can't offer the same, maybe same wages that the private sector does, or just things like that. So there's that. And then also just the lack of diversity and lack of mentors in the cybersecurity field for diverse candidates and employees. It's really a major issue and has a negative impact on retention rates across the board. And so again, these solutions are not exhaustive, and maybe they're not all, like, it's not a catch-all. So they're, I wouldn't say that any one of these solutions is the solution, but states are increasingly investing in cybersecurity through K-12, really looking to build it into the curriculum at the young age. Maybe this is computer science that offers some sort of cyber elements, and sometimes it's actually more cyber focused at each grade. North Dakota is one of the states here that kind of jumps out. They developed a set of K-12 computer science and cyber standards back in 2019. And that model is pretty unique. Cybersecurity is incorporated into each grade level. The state is also looking to build a credentialing program to train teachers on cybersecurity as well. And then one of the national organizations that I'd be more than happy to connect this committee with would be the cyber.org in Louisiana. They offer grant-funded cyber, STEM, and computer science curriculum and professional development to both K-12 educators across the country, really at no cost. And they've helped in the past different states' education departments align curriculum standards with their cyber framework as well. And I know they'll be working with some of our other states in this year's Cyber Policy Academy as well. And then likewise, states are really looking at the different cybersecurity competitions as a way to showcase really the kind of the dynamic side of the field and the really exciting parts of the field. So like CyberStart, CyberStart America, Cyber Patriot, just a lot of really good extracurricular activities and opportunities for students to get out of the classroom, maybe and interact with their friends and peers on doing some pretty cool, unique cyber challenges. And then implementing the NICE framework, as I was talking about this a bit before. So the NICE framework would look to really establish that common lexicon and accurately describe cybersecurity work and the workers. Montana, another state in our policy academy this year, they're a really good example of using this nice framework. And so their IT department integrated it throughout certain state agencies, and they're using it to assess their workforce, assess their different cybersecurity programs, and then develop retention and training plans as part of that, as well as some hiring plans. And I know this year they're looking to kind of build upon that and expand that even more. And I can get to that in a bit here too. And then also, just we were talking earlier about the regional labor market, doing that assessment of that, conducting a gap analysis. That's also been a common activity for a lot of states, really just trying to do a landscape scan of their state's post-secondary cyber training programs. What are the different credentialing programs? Maybe there's a cyber apprenticeship program. What's the capacity? What are the needs of the local industry? And then SLTT government within in that area, and then just trying to align those needs together with what the training programs are putting out. Essentially just connecting education and training providers, students, and industry really can also offer mentorship opportunities, strengthens relationships and builds trust, and can also help students get really a pretty good glimpse into what the cybersecurity field looks like as some of those partnerships kind of take more hold. And you're probably familiar with it as well, but cyberseek.org, they're a really good, I think, starting point to really get I think, a good glimpse of what this, like a snapshot of the state's cyber labor market looks like. And I know some states have used that to kind of build their own kind of inventory efforts. And then kind of looking here, some state and local governments have really taken to the just selling their office more. So many SLTTs aren't going to solve the lower salary issue, overnight, but they can pitch candidates on some of the other non-salary benefits like job stability, flexibility, the opportunity to stay and work local. And then some are looking to capitalize on the sense of civic duty, that they are protecting the network of their state, their community, things like that. And then finally, looking to kind of expand the pipeline beyond candidates from four-year programs. Through this, maybe look at promoting those mid-career upskilling programs, maybe non-traditional training programs like an apprenticeship program. I think states are starting to see that there's just not enough graduates from traditional four-year education routes to really fill that gap. So states and industry are looking to some of these different programs that have helped other industries solve recruitment, retention, and diversity issues to kind of help fill that gap. So there's been a lot of activity on this. Apprenticeship, there has been some interest within states at doing more public sector cybersecurity apprenticeship programs. I know the federal government has released different funding opportunities for it. It may not, those funding opportunities, I don't think are specifically for public sector, but there are, I think, just for in the private sector. And then, DOL and I think Urban Institute have also been, they've released standards and frameworks for organizations that are looking to implement a cybersecurity program or a cybersecurity apprenticeship program. Really kind of there, no need to reinvent the wheel. And I know I've been talking forever, and I apologize, but I did want to hit on some of the different work that we've done in the past with states on cyber workforce development. So like I was saying earlier about our cybersecurity policy academies, states do have the opportunity to focus in on specific aspects. So Michigan in 2019 or 2020 did focus in on cyber workforce development. So Governor Whitmer's team established a 3-pillar framework for building partnerships between the state and K-12 schools in cybersecurity. And that framework develops a maturity model for, you can kind of see it here, the enhancing school cybersecurity, promoting a consistent K-12 cybersecurity curriculum throughout the state, and then finally cultivating youth exploration of cyber careers. So the team is really there. That work is really continuing into 2021, 2022. 2020 was really to build this framework, and then we used our workshops to bring in about 70 different school district superintendents, cybersecurity teachers throughout the state, just to get their thoughts and feedback on it. So essentially it's a maturity model. They have level 1, level 2, level 3 is kind of modeled after that. I think it's the NIST crawl, walk, run approach. So that framework, it's designed to be adopted by individual school networks or school districts, I'm sorry. And then ideally it would lead to a model that would be able to be deployed statewide. So like many states, Michigan doesn't have top-down authority over a lot of its school districts, like curriculum, things like that. So it's really, they were looking to build the movement up from, I think, the ground floor and at the district level to kind of encourage better practices and better adoption of different cyber controls and cyber curriculum, things like that. And it just, with what this framework did look to do, is just, it breaks down that kind of overarching challenge of those 3 buckets into separate achievable steps. Really wanted to support the ongoing participation of each school. It really did, there was I think a big effort across the state, especially on pillars, actually on all 3 pillars actually, to identify what the existing resources are, organize them, look at what are the gaps, and then develop strategies to fill those gaps. And then the next slide here. So 2020, we worked with Tennessee, and Tennessee didn't apply specifically under a cyber workforce development issue area. They were more under the governance, but Governor Lee had established a cybersecurity advisory council that we worked with throughout that workshop series. And part of that, it was essentially, we were looking to create a statewide strategic plan that eventually was non-public, but that plan looks to incorporate, I think there were, 10 different kind of like goals, and 2 of them were focused on the state's cyber education and workforce development initiatives. And one of them was looking on developing a cyber curriculum strategy for K-16 that would align with the NICE framework, and then developing a roadmap to build the state's cyber workforce pipeline. So some of the work that they did there, that work is ongoing, and part of the action plan that we created for them actually went into, I think, like 2022. But some of that work involved engaging the different school districts on what their cybersecurity or computer science curriculum, and just what are some of their different teaching efforts and resources. What do they look like? Just getting that kind of inventory going, and then mapping those against the NICE framework, and surveying the different industries and private sector companies across the state on what their cyber workforce needs were, and developing outreach programs for job recruitment and placement programs. And they really did, they were one of those states that really utilized that CyberSeek tool that I know is a part of the NICE program. And then 2 states that we are working this year, peer states of Kansas in the 2021 Policy Academy, Washington likewise, they're not focusing in on cyber workforce development. They're focusing on state local partnerships, but a part of their work will be to support local government workforce needs. So they're looking specifically to identify different programs and resources and efforts across state government, across industry, nonprofits and academia that can help support and address their local governments' cybersecurity workforce needs. So again, just really trying to grapple with that data collection and inventory. I think they're probably another example of a state that's kind of grappling with that. And then Montana is focusing fully on workforce development and education this year. Their overarching goal is to ensure that employers across the state have access to a skilled and diverse cyber workforce, and that workforce would have access to cyber learning and employment. And they have around 8 different sub goals from that. And some of those, involve K-12 cyber or K-20 cyber curriculum and education, mapping and crosswalking the NICE framework with industry and different post-secondary requirements, looking into potential apprenticeship programs, and then just more really trying to invigorate the industry engagement within the state as well. So that's ongoing, and as Jeff knows, more than happy to connect this committee here with the work that's going on in Washington, Montana, as well as Tennessee and Michigan, and any other state that you think would be a good connection. More than happy to do that. But that's my presentation. If anybody has any questions, more than happy to answer those as I'm able to. Feel like my throat's a little raspy right now.
Thanks, John. We truly appreciate it. Some good information there. Do you know, for any that have worked on their inventories or starting to do they have, what's the plan for it, right? I mean, because it's one thing to then collect the information, but have they talked about how they want to use those inventories or how to leverage those to reaching kind of their more long-term goals?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think right now, like, just honestly at the very base level, just they want to be able to see what is out there within across the state, just to determine what the actual need is in the workforce. And then part of that is, I think they want to use some of that data to say, like, we have, I think there's 2 parts of getting some of that data. One, they want to see what the needs are. So they want to survey some of the different local, either local government, or maybe that's the employers, just saying, what are your hiring needs? What are your specific workforce needs when it comes to cybersecurity? And then also separately, surveying and landscaping, getting that inventory of what are the existing training programs in the state, where are, trying to get that demand and supply side taken down. And then from there, how do you connect it? How do you develop the different outreach programs? How do you look to boost recruitment and retention, placement? How do you connect some of these 2 needs that I think in many states are just kind of operating in the dark, or in silos from each other. And then I think part of that is also like looking and seeing which one of these organizations are doing this really well. Like, who are our employers across the state that are really having, like, that have a very robust hiring and retention numbers, and then who are the big education and training organizations in the state that are really kind of that are that, like, the champion pipeline essentially, and trying to see if there's any lessons learned, or have to see if some of the practices that they are modeling can be translated to other organizations, things like that. And then I know some states are looking to kind of develop different metrics for this as well, just to kind of how do you like trying to some sort of measurement of effectiveness. Maybe if there was an existing state program that did look to kind of boost training in cybersecurity over the last 5 years, how do we kind of measure that? Any sort of indicators of effectiveness for those programs or things like that. Does that help answer that?
No, yeah, very helpful. Just, wondering, right, as we start to think about these things and, kind of thinking how, about the pieces and how we can leverage into that larger conversation. Other committee members' questions, Doug or John, Jeff? Sorry.
Yeah, John, kind of going off of what you're just talking about, have there been any key partnerships that states have identified that have kind of boiled up as being their primary? So I went and looked, and there is a website here that is, a sponsorship between Commerce and Workforce and the Regents and Department of Education that already exists here. But has it been working with those state agencies, or has it been working directly, for example, with specific institutions? For example, we've got K-State here today. Has it been those kind of partnerships, or has it been working more directly with kind of the larger organizing committees to be successful? I mean, sometimes you work with larger and it just draws the process out, et cetera. So what have you seen kind of boil up as those key partnerships to identify and work through?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it does differ a little bit, but I would say, I think in every state, well, I don't want to say every state, but in many states, identifying some of the different academic institutions that are driving some of this. I know that was one of the keys to Tennessee's work, was working with Tennessee Tech, because they already had a really good grasp of the state's ecosystem that the states, some of the state agencies just didn't quite have, especially like if you're looking at like the state's IT department. They're just naturally, they don't have that kind of view into a state's workforce system. Other probably potential partners would be the states, and this probably is going to look different also in every state, but some sort of mix between the state's labor, in the state's labor agency, maybe the workforce boards in different states, the Commerce Department, Department of Ed, post-secondary education, K-12 education. And even there, you kind of get a sense of there's a lot of different players, and all those players might not be operating at the same on the same wavelength, and they might not be sharing information. They may be. I think that's a huge stumbling block, I think, when it comes to state agencies. But there's also different organizations. I know private sector companies have worked across states on some of this, like CompTIA has done a bit with kind of virtual upskilling with a number of states. Apprenti is another one that's been more focused on the cybersecurity apprenticeship programs. And then some of the different actual companies within states as well may have pretty robust training programs in-house that states might not be as aware of. But it really kind of it's an ecosystem, but really trying to find who are the main players in the different parts of the ecosystem can kind of help map out the rest of that.
Thank you.
Other questions for John, or thoughts, even just thoughts, reactions to the conversation? I took a ton of notes and just thinking about a few things. So other thoughts or questions? Hey, Doug, there you go, Doug. I saw your mic come on. Go ahead.
Yeah, just a comment. He mentioned a little bit about the job descriptions, and maybe there's some way for this to get more of a uniform playing field across the agencies and local government. Job descriptions, and whether they're IT or cybersecurity centric, there's just no standardization across those that I've seen across different Kansas state and local government. Some uniformity across there would be a good playing field, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And John, a couple of resources or some samples in some of the resources that I think you might have mentioned.
Yeah, so the NICE framework is kind of the gold standard for creating that common terminology for the different descriptions, experience required, or the kind of the KSAs, the knowledge, skills, and abilities required for different positions. but I think that's it's just like you said, it's not widely adopted across states. It's very there's no, it just, and that leads to a lot of different kind of almost sometimes competing descriptions, inconsistencies, confusion, and that I think can be hard for the hiring entity when they're trying to find and locate the ideal candidate. And it's hard for the actual candidates when they're entering the field to kind of think, I've done these different training courses, I've done these sort of programs, but I don't know if my skills here translate to this position. There's just a lot of different inconsistencies there, but I think mapping it or attempting to map to the NICE framework is that's where I think ideally a lot of states are looking to go, but that can be a difficult because I think so like when Montana was looking to do it, they initially looked at kind of creating that commonality within state executive branch agencies, places where they had a little bit more control than say kind of the private sector. But I think, ambitiously, I think some states are looking to kind of really get a sense of what the different major employers, the major hirers in that state, what's the descriptions that they are using, what are what are the KSAs there, and seeing how we can kind of almost form something that's a little bit more uniform. What are the commonalities, and how do we take once we have those, how do we then kind of crosswalk it with the NICE framework? But that's a mammoth undertaking when you think about that. There's a lot there. So
there's a long-term component to that, but I think even to kind of Doug's point of it may not start with a full-fledged framework that everyone is completely aligned to, but it could start with some a much looser frame of here are the basic pieces that you would have, and here's some of the basic descriptions and what they would look like. And across, even if it's across the public sector, being able to share that and utilize that as kind of a loose frame, not necessarily a hard frame, could help in places where they don't have anything, right? And it could help with some of that alignment, giving us the ability then to eventually build towards, kind of this larger conversation. But you're right. I love the idea of really being able to, how do you crosswalk across, having some standardization in the public sector and matching that onto the private so that we can better pipeline and be, more competitive across, both spaces. So yeah, that's right.
And I have kind of a bigger picture conversation, Dr. Wasserman. I'm going to kind of pull you in this as well, as based on your comments to the larger task force. So have any states, or in general, have you seen where and I've had conversations with the secretary on this, cybersecurity posture is not just, our cybersecurity folks doing things. It's a combination of IT operations, development practices, things like that. Have you seen states, try and map some of those skills back to the other job categories for things that they should learn, whether it's in the curriculum as well? Because I've had conversations with another university, because I do come from a computer science degree background. And, those fundamentals are key of understanding how things work and operate and stuff. And then you kind of build the security on top of that. But, when I went through the course, it was, here are the fundamentals, and security wasn't even really talked about it. But, as we look at the landscape, our posture is based on what our application developers are doing, what our network administrators doing, what are our server admins doing, to build that cybersecurity posture as a whole. It's both sides of the equation. So have we seen any states try and map out some of the skills, or try and train their folks of those skills? And again, welcome comments from Dr. Wasserman as well, and kind of his takes on that. But that was one of the things he had mentioned in our last meeting, is about the critical in the computer science foundation with those folks.
By the way, please call me Eugene. And one thing I should mention is I do not speak for KSU. So none of what I say should be generalized to university department or really anything like that. I've been taking notes as well. We are currently doing NICE mapping for our curriculum. And I can tell you it is a difficult process, especially considering that they are, I think, retooling how they're categorizing stuff again within this year, the next year. John, I don't know if you have any more details, but I'm on one of those subcommittees, and keeping up is easier than doing the initial thing. Right now we're performing our initial mapping. In terms of what states and even private sector is doing, I personally have not seen a mapping of between the NICE framework and the jobs themselves that are advertised. That is, if a job is advertised with a particular title supported by the NICE framework, I don't know if that's a coincidence or not. My exposure to that framework has been to compare curricula and maybe individual courses in an apples to apples way, or at least in a more consistent way. I can't say apples to apples because a course is more than a particular knowledge unit or part of the course. The course teaches more, but that may not map directly to the framework. Basically, the way I've seen it is within the academic context. So comparing academic to academic, but that can be across, I suppose, theoretically K-16 and even higher K-20. But right now that's what we're involved in. But this is a very long answer of I am not certain, either at the state level or at the or in the private sector. In fact, from the use cases of the NICE framework, it's implicitly there, but I've been worried about our side of it. And I hadn't been thinking in terms of employers being able to pass on requirements in a clearer way, which is ridiculous on my part and incredibly short-sighted. As soon as we have the mapping done, we should and we will reach out to industry and, of course, the state to see if there is anything that can now be compared much more easily. But until we even have an initial mapping, I'm not prepared to do that. However, this does tie into my suggestion at the general meeting of this task force for an industry matchmaking program. The NICE mapping could be incorporated into that entire thing. In fact, matchmaking can be highly granular. Of industries looking for this category. Okay, we provide this category. Okay, let's talk. Not just we provide cybersecurity talent, industries looking for talent.
Great.
And incidentally, this question was not asked, so I can abuse my time and say this is a question for John, but it's not entirely a question, it's a comment. I want to revisit two things that he said, and that is teacher training and K-12 programs. That is what we're really trying to push right now. That is, both of these exact things were in my notes for something to talk to you about today. This is, of course, hard to do without resources, but we're slowly doing it nonetheless. What I can tell you right now is it's very difficult to get this into high schools because of what the state does and does not consider worthy of college credit. So at the moment, we're working with 16-ish technical colleges to provide computational core materials to them so that they can go to high schools. As far as I know, there's no direct pathway that we can award credits at Kansas State University for and directly offer this to high schools. The state will not currently do this. We have to do it indirectly. And this is distinct from offering the program to community colleges. This is offering the program to high schools through community colleges, which puts an extra layer of difficulty, no matter how incredibly polite, helpful, and wonderful the individual community college is.
Do you have Eugene, do you have a sense, or have you all done any work on really mapping what currently exists in the K-12 curriculum around cyber, if anything?
We've had conversations with individual school districts and individual schools, and as far as I know, nothing is standardized. And even finding some basic computer science, I'm not going to say computer science, I'm going to say computer science-y material at anywhere in the K through 12 curricula it's really slim pickings. So introducing security in a way that's distinct from what I described during the general meeting, such as cyber hygiene, that is building on knowledge of actual computing rather than what can I do today, but no generalizable information. This is very, very difficult currently. And I'm aware of that state standards are evolving, and Kansas is in the process of building up what Kansas considers important for a statewide computer science curriculum. And I don't know what the current state of affairs is for that being pushed as a standard to K-12 schools. Anything would be progress. So my feeling is that very few schools offer anything, and those that do, I can't even say whether they do a good job because I have such a small sample size. I have very little basis for comparison within the state of Kansas.
Mm-hmm. I know one of the things that we, in terms of for a future one of our subcommittee meetings, we're trying to get a little bit more to get a couple of speakers to come in to talk about our K-12 landscape, like to give us a little bit more sense of it, teacher training, all these kind of pockets of things, because it does sound like there is some potential there. I will, pull on one of my past roles in the university setting where we created kind of summer programs or summer institutes, particularly for high school students. A lot of times we would do these in the field, in STEM fields, in the medical fields, to give high school students kind of a 4-week, 6-week summer experience on a college campus, introducing them to a content area, but also talking to them about the preparation that they needed, right? Connecting them with understanding what those pathways are. And I will tell you a number of these, when we were building these in one of my previous higher ed roles, it was also about access, right? So we targeted at the time at the university I was at, this was before my time at Kansas, at my previous institution, we targeted students who were coming from underrepresented backgrounds for that field. And so it was, depending on the field, like I remember we did a nursing program. So it was students of color, but it was also male students, and it was students coming out of some of our more rural areas where there was deficit in nursing. And at the institution I was at, they had a school of nursing, and they had both a regular, BSN program, but they also had an accelerated program, right? So, the idea was bringing that high school student, that, high school, junior or senior, sophomore or junior, usually, introducing them to the pathway, that this was a path, but also helping them in that, as a rising junior or senior in high school, understanding, the courses and how your high school courses matter in preparation, helping them understand like what things in college, because, just like as we're talking about cyber, in some of the areas that we would talk to students, there wasn't a major that was called that always at the university, right? And so if you didn't go, for instance, using nursing, if you didn't go to an institution that had a nursing program, you might do a degree in health sciences in preparation for, right? So that idea, just as we talk around all of this, it's one of the things that intrigues me about, sometimes, I guess when I think about some of this work, particularly looking as we're kind of focusing on that building talent, as John talked about it, versus the recruitment or the retaining, I think that introduction at an earlier stage, if it's not necessarily, fully part of the curriculum, there's ways that we leverage into it. Think about, if it's a partnership that's, bringing in high school students, but then you have higher ed partners, and then you have industry partners too, giving those students opportunities to see how, you use this field in action, right? Whether it's kind of a day in a life of experience or kind of shorter shadowing experience coupled with a bit of the academics, just thinking about those types of things, which then leads me to that next step of thinking about that recruitment and retaining, because then I think about that current professional who needs exposure, who needs additional training, and how do we leverage new opportunities, apprenticeships, fellowships, giving people the opportunity to see and get hands-on in the field, and show that commitment of that this is what I want to do, but I now understand what the field is as well. And then how do we create those opportunities to allow people to make those shifts, or, to gain that skill set. I'm throwing this all out there because these are like the thoughts in my head. I don't have, kind of cleanly formulated recommendations, but I liked how John laid out kind of the idea of like build talent, recruit talent, retain talent, and thinking about some of our recommendations across those buckets, right? In terms of what are some of the things that we believe should be, targeted, invested in, and collaborated around to build versus, how, that true like recruitment of bringing them in, of that pipelining, but then that last piece of that retention. And really that's where that workforce development and that training, for me, sometimes giving frame to things can help us think about how we, kind of leverage into each piece of it. So, yeah.
Thank you. I took a lot of notes about this. To some extent, the university already does this, not as a high school program, but there are middle school STEM programs, that is summer programs. I don't remember how long they are. A high school program, again, given some resources, we could set this up next year. It is, I don't mean to make light of it. I'm just saying the framework is already here. Pretty much everything is in place except for the ability to carry it out. So I shouldn't have said the ability, except for the resources, the money to carry it out, quite honestly. Same with, or similar with teacher training. That is, we could get that program in place very quickly. We've already worked with, I forget the name of the group within the university, but it's essentially those that are responsible for pre-service teacher training, and we can also do post, that is, provide security knowledge to existing teachers at any grade level. We will eventually do this no matter what. We are working toward doing it now, but resources would greatly accelerate this. Such as we could, with resources, we could probably have this in place within the year as well. Yeah. And right now we have computational core. Granted, we're still developing the security modules for it, but we have some coursework that can be within the computer science department that can be readily adapted for the computational core. But currently it's very challenging to offer. We can't do it directly to high schools. And that's a state level matter. That is, what is the correct way that we can do so, and where do we fit within what the state considers acceptable for high schools and college credit both.
Helpful. Thank you. Thank you. This has turned into a discussion, so I want to just keep it flowing and not necessarily, kind of chop it up. I want to kind of push us a little bit further to think about other spaces of recommendation. I think we're talking through some of them and grabbing pieces, and I know that Ali is taking notes and is going to help us kind of organize our thoughts. But I do want to also think about or go back to the training piece, that I guess shifting more to that retention of talent, right? What type of, and a piece of this, I think maybe goes to the inventory of understanding, how we talk about in that inventory, understanding, what's there, from a K-12 and a, kind of a pipelining, or not a K-12, like a higher ed, and kind of that beginning of the workforce. But I think maybe understanding what's there for our current workforce, right? What is that? What are those training resources that are in our state? What type of, are there opportunities, within and across like our, workforce centers and partnerships there that we could leverage into? The reason I was asking John, when you mentioned earlier the work-based learning, just that initiative in general, that just intrigues me. I think partially because of my academic background and the work that I do now of, how do you stand pieces of that up or make that part of a culture? I think as Jeff was saying in IT, to change or to strengthen our cybersecurity posture, it's not just about the cybersecurity staffing. It's not just about the cybersecurity pipeline. It's all across our IT spaces, and that work-based learning that is not the, all of us who have to spend, you get that requirement where you got to do your 1 hour of training a year on cybersecurity. No, this is, if you're an IT professional in our state, there's some work-based learning that's available that is essential because of the role that you sit in, right? But also can create opportunities for you to move into different roles or to gain a different level of a position or, within your organization because of the skill sets that you're able to build. So I just throw that out there for a conversation just around thinking more about the training piece, moving kind of now to the retention, right? And what things can we pour into further developing those that we have, or even those that are in parallel spaces in the IT world that can be, that you move into cyber, right? That you train up as that either second level cyber, expert, or we create pathways to let them evolve into becoming more of that cyber expertise. So open it up to just thoughts or ideas in that space.
That is what we're going for with our graduate certificate in cybersecurity.
And I just threw that out there last time because I know we have so many models in place, whether it's the public management perspective with training people to be public servant leaders, and then all the other service they provide, and even internally, again, a partnership with KU for our project management again, and kind of seeing there's places where we're going to see those models for cyber, I think. And then also, we train people from out of KDM for emergency management perspectives out to, the counties, as that is part of their operations every year is to provide that training. And again, I think there's some frameworks that exist, and I think those might be some viable frameworks for, any cyber efforts as well, because again, it transcends all the levels of government and, public-private partnerships and stuff. So, like I said, I do know we've got some models we could look at existing. I didn't know, again, kind of if other states have kind of used similar models like that, or are we kind of treading into some different territory with kind of leveraging models like that?
I don't know at the state level, but I had a suggestion which ties in exactly with this. It may seem like a very small suggestion, because I would suggest at least one person being hired, but it has ripple effects. The state might consider hiring a dedicated, under the chief information security officer, the state might consider hiring a person or several people who are experts in security policy to craft something either from the beginning or take what's there and adapt it for what's relevant now. I think an overall framework such as that will directly point to what is needed and from where, including which job descriptions or which actual duties performed by particular folks in particular jobs haven't kept up, or if new dedicated positions are needed. So building that kind of scaffolding, as the secretary said, it helps us think in a particular way. It guides our thoughts. It shouldn't give us tunnel vision, but it might expand how we think about this. So one or two people who are trained in security policy or have experience of working. These folks are rare, but were trained in cybersecurity, but have had experience dealing with security policy out in industry, or even better, out in the public sector. One or two such folks, given a few months to a year's time, could probably produce a scaffolding that will ask a lot of the right questions. It will answer some, but mostly I think it'll ask the right questions, such that we can identify the gaps and match them to resources.
Other thoughts? Any other thoughts or things that come to mind?
And I think, going along those lines, we do the same thing with, project management professionals here in the state. There's the requirement to ask that they all go through the project management training before they're thrown at large projects and things like that. So I definitely do think that's probably a good model to follow. So just how do we provide that training, and, what is that specific level of training, and, what that looks like.
Not to keep beating a dead horse, but I really think the graduate certificate we're developing will be helpful. We're targeting 12 credit hours or so, and it should be just perfect for someone with existing knowledge of computing to get a solid foundation for working with cybersecurity. I shouldn't even say that, because I think unknowingly everyone works with cybersecurity. It's a question of, is it acknowledged, and is it given due consideration and time?
Got it.
One other consideration, just thinking through, is this group kind of tries to sort through what the Kansas landscape looks like and what's existing out there. Would it be helpful to bring in to some of these meetings staff from like one of some of the different Kansas workforce, like maybe like State Department of Education or the Department of Labor or Chamber of Commerce, any of those folks, just to bring in there? Because I know Kansas has like the Career Navigator, which does try to align.
Together. Yeah. And I think we have, and Ali or Jeff may be able to speak to it. I think that we have some of those that we've reached out to kind of pull in to see, again, giving us a little bit more of that landscape of what's there that maybe we could leverage onto, right? Or lean into in these efforts of collaboration or identification of how we do this more holistically, right? And so I don't know, Ali, if you're there, I know that you guys have reached out to a couple of different entities within like Department of Ed and also Commerce and the workforce space, or Jeff, you can also speak to it. Because I think, John, like we're thinking the same way of like, yeah, we got it, you know, just like we're doing a little bit of learning more and more about the higher ed institutions. And I know we have one represented here, but it's a good, it's a good reminder to think about how the different ways and how dynamic they are as we think about our recommendations, but needing to get that other piece of it of what's happening in that workforce development space, what's already there that we could sit on top of. So I don't know.
Yeah, and some of the challenges is we kind of start finding these pockets, and then we're just seeing the front page. So it's trying to find out who are the folks behind the curtain of that front page and engaging them. So I'm reaching out to, you know, the Board of Education and you know, the various regents, institutions, and even the community colleges as well. Because, you know, looking at, they play an important role in workforce development, et cetera. And again, we're trying to find those because they are going to be important players long term. And so getting them involved in the conversation is key. So, you know, we are trying to find those specific people that have worked on certain projects. So start building that knowledge collectively. So as we find them, yeah, no, we're definitely trying to bring them to the table. So.
And it is possible to just to literally pay for their education within one of our universities, let's say Kansas State University, providing them a scholarship that that has a service requirement afterwards, that they stay in Kansas or specifically work for the state of Kansas, or heck, if your office funds it, work for your office for a particular period of time. And this is similar to the CyberCore program, but much more highly tailored. That is, if you're willing to wait 3 or 4 years, that is 3 or 2 if you want to recruit someone who's already studying this area, 4 if you want to grab someone right out of high school and put them through college. There's some excellent opportunities here.
Yeah, and from my perspective, you know, we're all tied together in some form or fashion at the government level. So definitely want to include folks like, you know, Doug's organization out in Finney County. Again, these are, you know, some ideal jobs for working remotely and working out in, you know, the western parts of Kansas, and can be good for the economy as well. So, you know, definitely want to explore those opportunities as well. So, you know, from my perspective, that's a very small investment for a huge return for the state. So.
And kind of related to that model would be the more formal, like the public sector apprenticeship program, where some states have looked at it. I know like North Carolina has one with its IT department, and California as well. I think there's always the question there of the funding for the program, and then also just sometimes I think there's relative unfamiliarity with the apprenticeship model and how it would relate to not just cyber, but I think just overall the tech sector. But some states have looked into that. I know, like I think I might have mentioned it earlier, Montana specifically looking at doing something similar within some of their executive agencies. But.
Incidentally, I'd like to caution this group about using cyber as a noun. Especially at federal agency level, I've heard 2 different contrasting ways of using this. One is to refer to all things computing, networking, electronics related, and the other one is a contraction for cybersecurity. I can tell you that at least once I've had a half an hour conversation where the two of us were talking about different things. And it took me 15 minutes to realize it, and another 15 minutes to understand what the other gentleman was speaking about. At the time, I didn't realize that cyber could be used as a contraction for cybersecurity. That's the windmill at which I tilt often, but I think common terminology is critically important for exactly this kind of discussion.
Agreed. You know, and I do want to also put out there, this is something from my past that may be something going back to John's point of kind of the apprenticeships and things like that. So when I first graduated, I had several phone call interviews that lasted about 5 or 10 minutes because they were looking for people with experience. They didn't want somebody coming in that had to train what an enterprise environment looks like. And so, you know, that has always been a challenge. Also, from my perspective, the hiring perspective, you know, somebody with the degree has not possibly been introduced to how an enterprise environment looks like to understand the concepts and the principles and things like that. But there is still a huge learning curve once you come out to understand, okay, this is how the network is run, it's organized and things like that. So that is one of the barriers to hiring, to where an apprenticeship or kind of that internship into a position might be beneficial as well. You know, I ended up having to take a third shift job just to get introduced to an environment and understand the complexities of an enterprise, to really get my feet wet, for lack of better terms. You know, I think that is one of the challenges, especially from the hiring perspective of, you know, we're always trying to look for that ideal candidate. And sometimes we're all short-sighted and seeing those people that are just coming out with degrees that they'll probably be good candidates. So there's just some time to get them familiar. So.
Yeah, the apprenticeship programs really can be that bridge, I think, between the experience and the lack of experience. Yeah, I mean, full disclosure, I managed a few NGA grants on apprenticeship, so I'm a big proponent of the apprenticeship model. But I know it's definitely one of those models that specifically does look to address, I think, so many of the issues plaguing facing the industry, and like recruitment, retention, diversity. It really does, and if implemented properly, it can be cost saving. But
I believe NICE. I'm sorry.
What was that?
I believe NICE is doing something about formalizing their what they consider apprenticeship programs.
Mm-hmm. That's good to know.
But I haven't followed the effort very closely. I don't know exactly what's going on. There's a teleconference in, I think, a couple weeks' time that I intend to attend and listen very carefully.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. They have a almost like a working group devoted to cyber apprenticeships that I think, likewise, Eugene, I try to attend, but sometimes the schedule always gets in the way. But and I know that it's formed. They have a steering committee that's them and DOL, and then also I think a number of different colleges that have done the apprenticeship model. So,
one of the other things, just that I think when we say apprenticeships, it has larger, kind of connotations, and typically is a more like a high level, certain aspects or components. But we do have at our disposal kind of our traditional internship model, right? With the state, we are in the process of revamping our state, government internship program and our platform to make it easier for students to find internships, to make it easier for state agencies to say that they have an internship, right? So putting a little bit of structure from the center, and this is across all areas, not necessarily IT or cybersecurity related, where you don't have to go to a particular agency and know that they have an internship to try to find it, where, kind of it's almost like a one-stop shop for internships with the state, right? we're doing some of that work and hoping to launch some of that kind of early next year. And this is, it'll be one easy place where we can, encourage our IT divisions across at least state agencies to say, hey, now you have an easy mechanism to be able to bring in a couple of interns and structure and some of those relationships. But that also just makes me think or wonder just again, and I think Eugene, it might have been, you had mentioned it, but going back to some of the conversation about the industry matching program, right? That, because that can be at multiple levels in some ways, but thinking about how do we be more intentional about if we're having these conversations and, entities like us at the state are doing this, are there ways that we can help put mechanisms in place? Maybe that helps. And this is where I pull in Doug, kind of some of the more local governments be able to leverage into an internship if they have support, in a different way, or a different central structure that allows to bring that intern on, but then can leverage out the resources to that, local government entity. Is there space in there to bring in our private partners, into the conversation or the mix? And I don't know, but I think about, because I do think when we say apprenticeships, we're thinking about something that is kind of next level and that could have a deeper level of engagement and preparation. But I don't want to miss when we talk about that, that recruitment of talent, that traditional internship model where they really are just, in an office beside us for 8-10 weeks during the summer doing, a job that would be appropriate for their level, being exposed, in that, not necessarily at that highest level, but just that exposure level, which we all know still makes a difference and has an impact. So, yeah. Eugene, go ahead.
Have you considered sending folks from the state level to university and college job fairs?
We do.
Okay. Yeah,
we do. It's that reality that, what I will tell you is that at the state level, we have recruiters, we go to the job fairs, we do it both from a central, I also have IT specific ones. We do all of that, but I think some of the reality of some of the other things that we talked about in terms of our pay scale, the description of our jobs, our job titles don't make us as competitive when we're in the larger job fair. You know what I mean? Like we're not maybe as shiny. The public sector is not always as shiny in that traditional job fair because, and that goes back to, I think, some of what Doug was talking about in terms of the descriptions and the titles. And sometimes we may not present as competitive when really we have some exciting jobs and opportunities. You can get some really interesting experiences being in the public sector in terms of the depth and the access to the work that we do, that enterprise level work, and so it is though, about how do we position ourselves differently and talk about our positions and ourselves differently to make us more competitive, whether it's in that traditional job fair or in other spaces. Doug, I saw your mic come on, jump in here.
Yeah, a comment from out here. A lot of times county jobs get looked at as like stepping stones. Oh, I'll come out here and I'll get 6 months or a year's worth of experience, and then I'm off to the big city type of thing. So we get a fair number of people looking for training or looking for that intro experience that move on and they don't want to stick around for whatever reason.
And I was going to ask, what's your landscape look like out there? Are people coming in and hiring and
even with a community college out here that does have a small number of computer classes, nothing cybersecurity centric, but a small number of computer classes, the market is, well, saying the market is dry would be a horrible understatement.
This is kind of a really out there idea, and it might not be feasible because of the pay scales, but because of the nature of our problem and how much of this work needs to be done in rural and hard to access areas, we could consider an inverted model where people do internships at the state level, like in Topeka with the CISO's office, but the jobs that they get after said internships could be at the city and county level. Again, this is only sustainable if the compensation is appropriate. And I don't know how feasible that is. But as a model to get qualified people, this might work.
This is so much kind of like the model with like the highway patrol, more or less, type thing, where they provide officers out across the state and rotate through, and everybody's at the same pay scale, more or less, no matter where you serve.
Or even a floating consultant position or group at the state level. A county may not be able to afford, in fact, I wonder if a county can use a full-time security architect. But if the county is rolling out a new system, if the county is, let's say, setting up a new domain controller, then a floating team at the level of the state could visit either to help with the setup or visit afterwards to audit the configuration. Again, not sure how feasible this is based on whether budgets can be basically whether the state can help counties that way. I know very little about state level policies.
Maybe if the state of Kansas was broke into like districts or something, and there was a state employee that could assist some of the county or local, departments out at the other edges of the state.
Yes.
So I have a question. Is the challenge you're facing people wanting to leave the area for better paying jobs, or just generally just moving away from the area?
It's everything. We'll hear people leaving for family, for money, for relationships, for every reason you can think of, we've heard out here. And the people moving out is a lot larger than the people moving in. Occasionally, we'll catch someone wanting to move back to the area later on because of family or something else.
Mm-hmm.
Those are a lot more rare than people leaving for the big city for a job or bonuses or whatever the case may be.
Very helpful. Because my mind is just like, kind of spinning. I'm like taking notes. I mean, there's just such a richness here. I think there's definitely some potential, again, in some of the opportunities and structures we already have. And just thinking about how we are intentional in leveraging and combining some of those things to better address our current needs and situations and our future posture, right? Yeah. Any other thoughts? I'm gonna try to wrap us up here as we come close to the hour. Any other thoughts? We'll be back together in 2 weeks. There's some stuff that we talked about last week that I think the team has been able to get their hands on, just some background information. We'll make sure we're pushing that. Please make sure you check out the SharePoint site. There's a couple of the reports, both that were referenced last week and that John mentioned this week. A couple of those are actually dropped in our folder in the SharePoint site. So, please check those out, as I do think that there are some things in there that we'll be able to kind of peel off because it aligns with what we've been talking about. But any last comments as we kind of wrap up today? Are there anything else? I took a couple of notes, and I'm sure Ali has them, just about, trying to get a little bit more information and bringing in some of our colleagues more on that workforce development space and some of that work that's happening. Also wanting to poke a little bit more at the K-12 and teacher training space to see if we can get some eyes in on that. Because I think it'll help also inform this conversation. Anything else we need to be pulling in, or any final thoughts on our conversation today? Jeff, I'll start with you. Anything in particular?
I kind of echoing what you said, I see a lot of opportunities and possibilities here, with the existing structures that we already have in place, and then just so many ways to get creative to help solve this problem. So it's I think continuing again the K through 12, a lot of the stuff early growing up was tinkering on my own, building things on my own type stuff. And how do we kind of help get that more formalized? And the K through 12 is huge. So I do think exploring that more would be beneficial. So.
Okay. Doug, any final thoughts?
No, not really. That covers most of the things that I could think of offhand.
Perfect. I so appreciate it. To our guests that have joined us today, John, Eugene, any other thoughts? And please know, I think you both know or can tell we're going to be reaching back out again to continue the conversations. But any other thoughts as we kind of wrap up today? John, I saw your mic. Go on.
Nothing huge, but just please let me know how we can help. More than happy to connect you with any of the resources or the associations I mentioned today. We've got a really good relationship with cyber.org, that K-12 Curriculum Standard Association, as well. Steve and I are meeting with NICE next week. We have, I think, quarterly check-ins with them. One thing, just to, when it goes to other states too, I think especially what we were just talking about, with some of the kind of student learning, student employment opportunities, especially in more rural areas, and how can we connect that back to state and local offices? That is something that was, I think, a huge part of the Michigan team's work last year when they were thinking about that third pillar on just how can we kind of create that pathway between high school students who are interested in cybersecurity and their local community, and how can we connect those more, especially with very rural areas in Michigan, the North, the Upper Peninsula, like those. I think they struggle to also recruit and retain as well. So I think there's some definite connection points.
Right. Eugene, any final thoughts?
I know I've beaten this horse to death, but additional resources are needed. It's not just streamlining and connecting what we already have in the state. We, for example, we literally don't have enough faculty to teach some of these courses we're developing. We'll find them, but that'll take time because someone's developing a course, let's say this semester, so they're not available. If we had more people, then this could be done in parallel. Those resources are an investment. And this can probably be done with targeted one-time investments rather than continuous money sinks. That's not the best way of putting it because I don't think it's a sink, but targeted one-time investments may greatly accelerate progress, such as ours on our certificate program, and would allow just broadening how many people we can reach simultaneously.
Thank you all for a wonderful conversation. We are back again with the whole group next week, continuing our ideas. Ali is going to take our notes from today, start to pull them apart. We're going to start to put some language around some of our recommendation areas for us to be able to react to. And again, we'll start very generically and kind of move from there so that we can then start to shape. And again, in this first pass of kind of the report out that's due later this month, it may be more high level or broad themes or broad strokes as we start to formulate the recommendations over time, understanding that our end goal is really at the end of the year, which still gives us a bit more time. But I think even here we've been able to already, we can see the edges of it.
and where we would want to really emphasize based on our needs and our gaps and where we want to go. So thank you all for a robust conversation, truly appreciate it. And please, if you have other thoughts afterwards, send Allie a note. Something comes to you and you're like, oh, we were talking about this, I saw this, or I was thinking about this, or this came to me later. Please share that with her. She'll add them into the notes and recirculate it back out to the group. With that, thanks to everyone who's joined us this morning. Truly appreciate your efforts. We are going to make this better, stronger, more effective across the board as we continue to bring the voices together to have this work. So with that, have a great rest of your week, everyone, and I'll see many of you next week.
Thank you.